Docs present Wonder Number 20, the complete story of the Scholastic Book Fair. How one week changed an entire generation of readers. Black silence, then the squeak of a rolling metal book cart, cardboard boxes sliding across a school hallway floor, a librarian cutting through packaging tape, the crinkle of a folded paper flyer landing on your desk, a teacher smiles. Don't lose this, the book fair is next week. Suddenly, nothing else matters. Look, let's keep it real right out the gate, okay? When you talk about the milestones of growing up, people love to talk about summer vacations, field trip days, and pizza party Fridays. But many cultural historians have argued that the most electrifying retail and social event of any elementary school year did not happen at a mall, a toy store, or a theme park. It happened right down the middle of your school's gymnasium or library. You dig? For 5 glorious days in the middle of October or November, the cafeteria tables were pushed against the walls, heavy black and yellow cases were popped open, and a sprawling multi-tiered maze of paperbacks, posters, and neon novelty pins took over the entire building. For decades, cynics reduced the Scholastic Book Fair to clever corporate scheme to get kids to buy plastic keychains and glow-in-the-dark bookmarks, but over time, the real story revealed itself to be much deeper than just a few scented erasers. It was a massive generational ritual that taught children how to choose their own adventures, turning ordinary school hallways into some of the most beloved pop-up bookstores many American children would ever experience. And there is always more to the story. Act 1. Before the book fair. Chapter 1. Maurice Robinson and the Classroom Revolution. Stories have always been among humanity's oldest companions. Long before there were multi-million-dollar scholastic distribution networks or digital reading apps, tales were passed down by campfires, front porches, and classroom chalkboards by people trying to make sense of a complicated world. Sound and story travel through history, picking up the exact flavor, comfort, and eager anticipation of the people experiencing them. In 1920, a visionary educator named Maurice R. Robinson founded Scholastic in a basement room with a simple radical premise. High school students needed magazines that explained current events in language they could actually understand. He didn't want dry academic textbooks putting kids to sleep. He wanted real journalism written for real youth culture. That single magazine laid the track for an entire publishing empire. Chapter 2. The Rise of Classroom Periodicals. Before books ever flooded a gymnasium, Scholastic conquered the classroom one weekly magazine at a time. Teachers loved them because they kept kids engaged with current science, arts, and world events. Students loved them because they weren't heavy, intimidating tomes. They were punchy, colorful, and relevant. By building that distinct pipeline straight into the American classroom, Scholastic earned the ultimate currency in education: trust. Teachers trusted them, administrators trusted them, and once you have that kind of trust, you can start dreaming even bigger. Now, chapter 3. The paperback book club breakthrough. Then came the mid-century paperback book revolution. Before Scholastic stepped in, buying a book meant going to a brick-and-mortar bookstore, assuming your town even had one with a good children's section, and paying hardcover prices that made parents wince. Scholastic changed the game by introducing monthly book clubs through school mailers. Suddenly, quality paperback books were dirt cheap. Kids would check off the titles they wanted on a tiny paper slip, hand over a crumpled $5 bill or a personal check from mom, and wait anxiously for the cardboard box to arrive weeks later. It was effective, but it was solitary. The next logical step was to bring the entire bookstore directly to the kids. Now, Chapter 4, The Logistical Roots of Mobile Literacy. You cannot build a nationwide pop-up empire on good vibes alone. You need absolute logistical muscle. Like, let's be real. Before the modern fair took over every school in the country, the early days of mobile book selling looked like traveling circus. Now, publishers experimented with station wagons, trunk sales, and makeshift tables pushed together in chilly hallways. It was messy. Inventory was always a nightmare. Coordinating shipments across thousands of distinct school districts required an extraordinary level of logistical coordination across inventory, shipping, security, and volunteers. When the modern Scholastic Book Fair model finally locked into place, it solved that chaos by turning school distribution into a turnkey, highly organized military-grade operation. Now, Act 2, Building an Empire. Chapter 5, The First National Pop-Up Shops. When the modern fair model hit its stride, the transformation in schools was instant. Instead of waiting weeks for a single mailed-in paperback, children walked into a physical wonderland constructed right inside their own school. The brightly colored wire racks, revolving display spinners, and towering stacks of new releases created an immediate sense of arrival. It wasn't just a book sale, it was an event that completely hijacked the normal school routine, turning the library into Grand Central Station before Rihanna came and shot that man down. Now, Chapter 6, The Warehouse Machinery and Warehouse Operations. Behind every neat stack of paperbacks sat a massive humming warehouse infrastructure. Thousands of bright yellow and black plastic cases packed tightly with exact inventory ratios tailored to elementary, middle, and high schools, drivers navigating rural routes and bustling city streets, warehouse teams working overtime before the fall rush. It was a complex supply chain moving books from printing presses straight into gymnasium folding tables, proving that children's publishing could run with the efficiency of major retail giants. Now, Chapter 7, The Power of the PTA and Volunteer Networks. You can ship all the cases you want, but somebody has to open them. Enter the Hidden Army Parent-Teacher Association, local volunteers, and dedicated school librarians. Shout out to them. We love you so much. Parents spend hours unboxing inventory at 6 in the morning, pinning up colorful cardboard display headers, and working in cash registers while dodging sticky fingers and excited second graders. Many educators came to view the fair as a vital anchor for school budget, since a percentage of every sale went directly back into purchasing new classroom resources, updated library books, and technology upgrades. These volunteers were the true architects of the experience. Chapter 8, Curating the Catalog. How did books actually end up on those spinning racks? It wasn't a random. Scholastic curators balanced educational value, emerging publishing trends, massive commercial blockbusters, and classroom demand. They had to satisfy school boards, teachers, parents, and most importantly, kids, who would walk right past a literary masterpiece if the cover didn't grab them by the eyeballs. That delicate balancing act between high-minded literacy and pure pop culture entertainment defined the catalog for generations, okay? Now, Act 3, The Golden Age of Phenomena. Okay, Chapter 9, The Golden Age of Children's Publishing. While the Book Fair network expanded coast to coast, an entirely different kind of literary boom was quietly exploding on these folding tables. Exploding onto these folding tables, you heard me right. It was the golden age of late 20th century children's and middle grade publishing. When you walked up to those spinning wire racks during the late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, you weren't just looking at books, you were looking at cultural artifacts, okay? Publishers realized that kids wanted spooky stories, interactive formats, and weird science, and they delivered in a massive way. Chapter 10, Goosebumps Mania and the Birth of Reluctant Readers. Nothing captured playground conversations quite like R.L. Stine. The Goosebumps phenomenon took over book fairs with its glowing embossed foil covers, creepy cliffhangers, and twisted plot turns that kids traded like trading cards. Before Stein, traditional schooling told kids that reading had to be heavy, serious, and moralistic. Goosebumps threw that rule book out the window. It made horror acceptable and thrilling for elementary readers. If you had the newest release on Monday morning, you were royalty on the playground. Stein turned reading into a horror movie marathon where you controlled the remote, proving that kids loved being delightfully terrified and creating an army of lifelong reluctant readers. Chapter 11, Animorphs, Captain Underpants, and Beyond. And the hits just kept coming. There were the shape-shifting animal heroes of Animorphs dealing with alien invasions, the underwear-powered juvenile humor of Captain Underpants, saving the world from talking toilets and historical time travel adventures of Magic Treehouse, the visual scavenger hunts of I Spy, and the bizarre science experiments of Coates books. Alongside the book sat the holy grail of fair accessories, spy pens with invisible ink, scented markers that smelled suspiciously like artificial fruit, slap bracelets, 3D hologram bookmarks, and giant novelty erasers that were never ever allowed to actually be used for erasing. The book fair was a sensory overload of pop culture ephemeria. You know what I'm saying? Now, chapter 12, Harry Potter changes everything. Then, right at the turn of the millennium, the entire landscape shifted on a magical broomstick. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone landed on book fair tables in completely redefined scale. Before Hogwarts hit the fair, the publishing industry operated under the strict assumption that children would never ever sit still for a massive multi-hundred-page hardcover novel. J.K. Rowling shattered that myth permanently. Kids who barely touched the book all year were suddenly lining up around the gymnasium, rapping past the water fountains, clutching thick hardcovers like sacred relics, midnight launches, unprecedented school demand, and librarians scrambling to manage the frenzy proved that children's publishing was a global economic powerhouse. Chapter 13, Graphic Novels Take Over. As publishing evolved into the 21st century, a new heavyweight champion stepped onto the gymnasium floor. The graphic novel. For decades, traditional educators looked down their noses at comic-style books, writing them off as visual candy rather than real reading. But literary research proved that visual storytelling unlocks comprehension for diverse learners. When series like Raina Telegramia's Smile, Dave Pinky's Dogman, and Jeff Kinney's Diary of a Wimpy Kid exploded in popularity at the book fair, they completely rewrote the rules. These books didn't just compete with traditional novels, they created a brand new generation of voracious readers who loved hybrid visual formats, proving that the medium of children's literature was always expanding. Chapter 14, The Kingmaker, How Book Fairs Made Authors. Behind every best-selling phenomenon stood the ultimate literary kingmaker. For an author, getting selected for a Scholastic Book Fair wasn't just a distribution win, it was hitting the jackpot. Countless careers exploded because a manuscript caught the eye of a Scholastic curator's and landed on folding tables in 50,000 schools simultaneously. Writers who might have remained regional footnotes suddenly found themselves signing millions of copies for kids across the country. The book fair created a direct pipeline from an author's imagination straight onto the nightstands of an entire generation, cementing Scholastic as the most powerful tastemaker in children's literature. Act 4, Every Kid's Dream Week. Chapter 15, the Psychology of the Flyer. When the physical display drew crowds, the psychological buildup began days before the first box was even opened. Think about the ritual of the glossy paper flyer. Long before you stepped foot near the gymnasium, that folded paper landed on your desk like an architectural blueprint for your reading life. You didn't just read it, you studied it. You circled the top choices in red pen, starred the ones you absolutely could not live without, and priced out your total against whatever allowance or parental budget you hope to negotiate. You dig what I'm saying? If you know, you know. Now, making that list felt like making a Christmas wish list, except the stakes were so much higher. Because this was your ticket to cultural currency among your friends. Chapter 16, Anticipation, Scarcity, and Playground Status. That anticipation was a masterclass in childhood consumer psychology. You knew the stock on the spinning racks was limited. If you waited until Friday afternoon to grab the hot new title, some other kid might snag the last copy. That scarcity drove playground status through the roof. It taught kids how to plan, how to budget, and how to hustle to get what they wanted before supplies ran out. Chapter 17, The First Taste of Independence, if you will. Okay? Now, behind every receipt and volunteer clipboard, a sophisticated economic and educational engine was humming along. But for the kids holding the money, it felt like pure freedom. For many kids, this was the absolute first time in their lives they were given a small amount of cash and complete autonomy over what to purchase. This was no teacher assigning a book report. There was no parent vetting every page for curriculum requirements. There was just you, your $20, and a table full of stories waiting to be discovered. That moment planted the seed of true personal agency. Chapter 18, The Child Who Couldn't Buy Anything. Yet, we have to keep it entirely real about the other side of the gymnasium floor. Because for every kid clutching a $20 bill, there was another child walking down those aisles with empty pockets. Not every family had discretionary cash for book fair week. Some kids could only afford a 50-cent novelty eraser or a cheap bookmark, while others wandered around pretending to browse just to look like everyone else. That emotional reality was part of the fair's unspoken history. But it also brought out the best in the community. Dedicated school librarians quietly setting aside donated books, teachers running anonymous wish programs, and parent volunteers covering costs out of their own pockets to make sure no child left empty-handed. That quiet grace note became the true emotional heart of the book fair experience. Chapter 19, The Sensory Archive of Memory. Styles change, platforms change, generations change, school hallways change, but the sensory memory refuses to fade. The exact smell of the gymnasium floor wax mixed with the fresh paper stock, the weight of a heavy hardcore encyclopedia set you wanted but couldn't afford, the bright neon glow of the poster racks featuring sports cars, fantasy castles, and pop icons. Those weren't random objects. They were permanent bookmarks stamped into the minds of millions. Act 5, How It Changed Reading Forever. Chapter 20, The economics of school fundraising. While the financial ledgers and fundraising totals mattered to school boards, the true impact happened entirely on an emotional and social level. In eras of tight public school budgets, the rewards earned from book fair sales provided critical funding for new library books, classroom computers, and reading programs. It turned students into direct financial supporters of their own learning environments without them ever realizing they were helping keep the lights on. Chapter 21, Shaping Publishing Trends. The sheer buying power of the Scholastic Book Fair didn't just fill school shelves, it steered the entire children's publishing industry. If a book blew up on a book fair circuit, publishers knew they had a runaway hit on their hands. Authors and illustrators tailored their pacing, cover art, and themes to connect with that exact demographic, making the school fair a powerful kingmaker in the literary world. Chapter 22, Literacy Choice and Lifelong Readers. At its core, the fair proved the vital educational truth. Kids read more when they get to choose what they read. Forcing classic down a student's throat often breeds resentment, but letting them pick out a wacky joke book or a neon-covered mystery builds an actual habit of reading. The fair bridged the gap between schoolwork and leisure, turning reading from a chore into a lifestyle. And that was always cool beans. Now, Act 6, Legacy and Modern Evolution. Chapter 23, Navigating Modern Debates and Censorship. Of course, whenever you combine children's literature, consumerism, and a massive corporate distributor inside a public school, you get plenty of debate from inside the house. Observers, parents, and educators have spent decades asking tough questions. Has commercial saturation turned a celebration of literacy into a high-pressure toy store? Are book fairs prioritizing blockbuster media tie-ins over substantive literary value? How do schools handle equity when some children walk in with $50 and others walk away with nothing? And how do catalog curators navigate modern book selection controversies and censorship debates? These are not petty complaints. They are serious, thoughtful conversations about commercialism, equity in public spaces, and the delicate balance of bringing enterprise into educational environments. Over time, the tension between educational mission and commercial pop-up retail kept the community honest and reflective. Chapter 24, The Digital Era and COVID Era Virtual Fairs. As we look toward the modern landscape, the rigid lines separating physical school gymnasiums and digital e-commerce are shifting entirely. Think about how technology transformed the traditional fair. Digital flyers, online ordering portals, e-wallets, and virtual catalogs expanded access beyond the physical tables, allowing remote learners and digital-first families to participate during unprecedented times like the COVID era. Yet, despite the rise of tablets and streaming audiobooks, the physical pop-up fair stubbornly endures because the core magic was never just about the paper itself, it was about the shared physical space of discovery. Chapter 25, Why Adults Still Remember the Smell. Artists, educators, and dreamers continue to explore how physical book traditions adapt to the digital world, holding to the view that tangible browsing still holds a unique power over young minds. Adults across America can still vividly recall the exact feeling of walking through those doors. They aren't just remembering a retail transaction, they are remembering a time when life was measured in book fairs, when imagination had no limits, and when a single week in a school gymnasium could open a door that stayed unlocked for the rest of their lives. Chapter 26, The Lasting Paper Trail. Now, styles change, platforms change, generations change, school hallways change. But for decades, adults and dreamers have continued to do the same remarkable thing. They have remembered, sometimes through folded paper flyers circled in red ink, sometimes through neon bookmarks and spy pens, sometimes through spine tingling horror paperbacks, sometimes through gymnasium cafeteria tables pushed against the walls, sometimes through the squeak of a rolling metal book cart. Different decades, the same unforgettable excitement of walking into the book fair. I am D. Moore, and remember, headlines fade, culture lasts, because there is always more to the story.